Welcome to the Pocket. I'm your host, Scooter, and today I am so excited because the draft is finally less than a week away. No more mock drafts, no more what I would do, no more player evaluation. Finally, we get to just sit down and think about what the teams are actually going to do. So very excited to finally get into this. This is actually the very first thing I did in terms of football content. I made Instagram Reels last year, and I did pretty good. I got like almost half the players to the correct teams, not the exact spots and everything, but you know what I mean. So excited to get back into it and give it another shot in video form. By the way, thank you for 250 subscribers. The channel has grown a tremendous amount. In the first year, I had no idea what to expect, but the support and the engagement has been phenomenal, especially on the Jalen Hurts, is he overrated or overhated video. If you haven't seen that, I highly suggest you go check it out. Definitely my best video, but excited to keep improving for you guys. I put a lot of work into this predictive mock draft, so let's get right into it. And here we are finally going to be taking our last look at the mock draft simulators that we've all been using for months and months now, as we have been starved of football content, especially since free agency had finished up. So let's get started right away with the number one overall pick. And for me, there was a discussion early on in the offseason about whether they were going to consider not going quarterback and maybe taking an Abdul Carter or a Travis Hunter. But I think after seeing what they've done in the offseason, not really adding anything to the quarterback room, still having Will Levis there as the supposed starter, I think that signaled to us and, the entire league that they're definitely taking Cam Ward with this number one overall pick. And I still think it's going to be worth it. I mean, Cam Ward, people talk about where he might have been rated in last year's class or next year's class. But to me, I still think he's a quarterback who's got a lot of talent and a lot of intangible skills, such as like pocket presence, throwing off platform, and just kind of that killer instinct to try to squeeze as much juice out of every play that he can. I think those are really great qualities for a quarterback to start your franchise with, to kind of elevate the players, something you haven't been getting from a guy like Will Levis or anyone you've had for the past couple of years, for a matter of fact. So this is who they've been waiting for. No need to get cute here. You take Cam Ward with the number one overall pick, and that's how this draft is going to start. So there we get Cam Ward. And up next, we have the Cleveland Browns, who are picking second overall. And this is really where the draft starts, right? Because a lot of people have been discussing over the offseason whether this is going to be Shador or if it's going to be best player available. And I think everyone has really gotten to the point with Shador where they're not even sure if teams are going to take him in the top 10, right? Some other teams that might be considering taking him. It really is just the ceiling with him. You talk about a guy like Cam Ward and what the difference is between him and Shador. And of course, we could always be wrong, but it seems that even though Shador was in, a pretty bad environment with the offensive line and everything, that Cam Ward is just able to make up for more than Shador is able to. And that's, a quality you really want in your franchise quarterback, someone who can win for you when some of your key guys might go down. He can do something with his legs or, make some really difficult throws that Shador might not be able to make because Shador is definitely more of like a processing quarterback. And although that does have a role in the NFL, there's a place for guys like that. I don't think it's on struggling teams like the Browns or the Titans. So there you have it. They're not going to take Shador, but who are they going to take if it's best player available? Is it going to be Travis Hunter or is it going to be Abdul Carter? I do think it actually is a really good question. You might say it's so obvious because it just paid Myles Garrett that there's no reason for them to take Abdul Carter when they do have needs at wide receiver and corner. But, the argument there is that, hey, you don't have to pay Abdul Carter and you can have the best edge rush duo in the league for 4 to 5 years, right? Because Myles Garrett's under contract, Abdul Carter's under his rookie contract, and you can use other resources like money and, trade for guys and give them extensions at wide receiver and corner, especially corner, a position where, guys really have to develop a lot more. But all that being said, I do still think both of these prospects are, potentially elite and blue chip level prospects. Like Carter's definitely that blue chip edge rusher in this class. But Hunter, to me, is that blue chip corner and that blue chip wide receiver, more so based off of talent because he didn't practice wide receiver. But to me, that just signals that he's even better, right? His potential is even better than what we have already seen. To me, he's arguably the best player in the draft. It's between him and Gentry. So I think the Browns should just go ahead and take Travis Hunter here. because, like I said, he fulfills two needs for them if they really need him to. He actually wants to play both ways, which is crazy. I wonder what kind of contract you could end up paying a guy like that. But either way, I think Travis Hunter, best fit for them and best player for them to take there. But Abdul Carter would be a good choice as well. Up next, we have the New York Giants, and this is another team where a lot of people are going to be suggesting taking Shedeur Sanders. But much like the Browns and unlike the Titans, now the Browns haven't done quite as much as the Giants at the quarterback position, but they did acquire Kenny Pickett. They acquired Joe Flacco, and that's something. That's not like the Titans or the Saints, who have just pretty much stayed put. The Giants have done quite a bit. They've gotten Jameis Winston, who some people thought they were just going to roll with him, but then they went ahead and got Russell Wilson. So that's a guy who should be the starter this year. And I know people talk about the contract and whatnot, but to me, it's like, why would you draft Russell Wilson, or excuse me, not draft him? Why would you sign Russell Wilson if you were going to take Shedeur Sanders this year, a guy who's supposedly going to be ready right away, right? He's this processing quarterback. He doesn't need to develop those things. People talking about drafting a quarterback like that's going to save their job. That means your first round pick is either not playing, or the quarterback that you just paid money to in the offseason, two of them are not playing. So that's not a win now decision, and that's what they need to do to save their job. So to me, the Giants are also out on Shedeur for the very same reasons as the Browns. I don't think Shedeur is going to be able to be that successful or, hit right away with these two teams. So they're both going to go best player available. And for the Giants, that's going to be Abdul Carter. But problem, the Giants have Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. So wouldn't this be, not a position of need at all? In fact, one of the least needed positions for the Giants. That's true. But edge rusher is one of those positions that, and we've even seen it in the past with the Giants, teams like the Eagles, who already have both of their starters, go ahead and take other edge rushers and just make sure you have not just two, but three guys, right? You can also rotate them, use them in different packages, keep them fresh, and absolutely exhaust the offensive linemen on the other team, especially when, you basically have 3 first-round picks on your defensive line. And it's not like these are picks who have busted, right? We traded for Burns in his prime. I mean, Kayvon hasn't been all that, but he's shown a lot of flashes of potential and put together some good seasons. And then obviously Abdul Carter is the blue chip edge rusher in this class. But where I'm going with this is a really ideal spot for the Giants to trade down because of, the other needs that we have, acquiring more picks, trading this pick away to a team that wants to get Abdul Carter. You could get a pretty good haul for that. I think the teams that I would expect to want to make an aggressive move for an immediate impact defensive lineman would be, say, the 49ers or the Panthers. They're within striking distance, right? The Panthers are at 8, the 49ers are at 11, so you won't have to trade a ridiculous amount to get there. But in the end of the day, a big theme for this draft is I don't think a lot of teams are going to want to move up. I think there's a lot of good players, and once you get away from these top 3 picks, though, I think there is a tier gap. So this is a spot where I'm not doing trades in this draft, but I'm going to tell you where I think they could happen. And this is definitely a spot where I could see the Giants trading out of this spot. But I think drafting Abdul Carter is also a very good consolation prize for sitting at number 3. You will have an elite pass rush almost no matter what, barring some crazy injury situations or somehow Abdul Carter not working out. And then even then you still have Kayvon and Burns. So it's like, you'd really love to see a Giants team with a pass rush that's going to stay healthy, because it looked great. And then Kayvon got hurt and the rest of the team started falling apart. It wasn't quite there. It seemed like it was just kind of, a couple games that they dominated. But I think this is the pick here. Other positions to consider, defensive tackles in need. So people could say Mason Graham, pair him up with Dexter Lawrence and actually flesh out the offensive line. I think that's great value. But once again, I'd rather trade down, and Carter's a better player. So to me, I wouldn't do that. I mean, it's a fun idea, but it's just not worth it to me. Definitely would like to trade down here, but the Giants are going to go ahead and draft Abdul Carter with the 3rd overall pick. Now up next, we have the New England Patriots, and they are still in the process of their rebuild. Drake May started a couple games in the last year and actually looked really good, but definitely struggled without much help from his offensive line or his wide receivers. They fired Gerard Mayo and hired Mike Vrabel, so that's definitely something to keep in mind, that is the head coach of this team when they're drafting, right? So you might want to keep an eye out for like a hard-nosed guy, who's got that mentality that'll fit with Mike Vrabel's culture. And looking at the guys who are available and the needs that they're going to have, I think you really want to help out Drake May in one way or another. This defense doesn't look too bad. So you're looking at wide receiver or offensive line. And although you would have really liked Travis Hunter here, he's gone. And now you're looking at Tet McMillan, or T-Mac as he prefers to be called if you're going to abbreviate. And then you have offensive line where you got guys like Will Campbell. You have Armand Membu, who's also a great prospect. I don't think you're going to be reaching down the board for any of these wide receivers like Luther Burden or anything at this spot. I think it's just a bit high for that. So to me, it's definitely between T-Mac and Will Campbell or Armand Membu. So let's decide between those two right now. So Armand Membu definitely has a lot of more athletic traits when it comes to things like arm length and size compared to Will Campbell. But what I think is really going to stand out to Mike Vrabel about Will Campbell is he started as a freshman. He's got a great attitude that I think is going to fit well with him. Like, and I don't care what people say about my arm length. I heard him talk about in an interview about it, and he seems very, very confident in himself. And I think that's something that Mike Vrabel is going to appreciate. Now, Armand Membu may very well share some of those traits, but to me, they just stuck out a little bit more in Will Campbell. So Will Campbell or T-Mac, this is really tough because they're both things that are going to help Drake May. But I think ultimately you definitely want to go offensive line because even if T-Mac is great, if you don't have protection, right, not going to set up those deep passes to him, whether it's a jump ball or whatever it may be. You're not going to have time to throw the ball downfield if you can't block. So I definitely think the Patriots are going to go with Will Campbell here. And this is a very common pick. And I may even be talking a little too much about some of these picks, you know, these first 4 or 5, because these are very, very common picks. But let's keep going and see maybe how I predict things will go a little differently from the consensus. So number 5, is it going to happen here? So the Jaguars have had a lot of steam and a lot of smoke about different positions and different things that they could do here. They have a new general manager. He's the youngest in the NFL, so you never really know. He could do something bold. But let's go through each of the positions of need and see what sort of the gripe is with each of those picks. So for Ashton Jeanty, we've heard noise about that. Obviously, to me, probably the best player in the draft next to Travis Hunter. And you really can't go wrong drafting a guy like that. But you do already have Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby, so there really isn't a need there at all. So that's the issue there. For T-Mac, I think this is something that makes sense. You know, Liam Cohen pairing him up with Brian Thomas Jr., you know, given that wide receiver duo to Trevor Lawrence, that he hasn't really had like a solid pairing that at least has been able to stay on the field. So I really like the sounds of that. But, you know, based on what the general manager has said, that he really values the trenches, number 1, and number 2, he really looks for intangibles, you know, things you can't really coach that much. And I'm sure T-Mac is going to be great, but he did say something in an interview talking about how he only really watches film in the wide receiver meetings. And, you know, if he stopped there, it would have been kind of okay. But then he kept going and said, really doesn't enjoy or kind of care to do it by himself. Like he kind of sounds like he thinks he's good, right? Like he just doesn't need to. And I don't think that's going to, you know, fare well when it comes to this new general manager and what he's looking for. So that's the issue there. Tyler Warren's great, but they do have Brenton Strange, you know, took him in the, I think it was the 2nd round last year. So are you going to invest, you know, a 1st and a 2nd round pick in tight end over 2 years? I don't think so. Armand Membu, I think this is very enticing. Great fit for the trenches. Trevor Lawrence keeps getting injured because they can't protect him. So obviously that would be extremely helpful. But I think the guy that does fit here the best, and this is the reason this has been mocked so often, is Mason Graham. And it's because, first of all, he fits those intangible qualities that they're looking for. Number 2, he's in the trenches. And people question, you know, the upside of him at his pick, you know, referencing things like his arm length and things like that. But he wouldn't be the number 1 rated defensive tackle in the class above Walter Nolan if he didn't improve and exceed his expectations already. So to me, I don't really see a drawback there. You're going to have a really, really strong defensive line between Josh Hines-Allen, Trayvon Walker, Mason Graham, and Eric Armstead. So I definitely would like to see how that pass rush looks. You know, in the AFC, you're going to need that. In the AFC South, where, you know, there's been some movement on the Colts offensive line. The Titans offensive line is not good, and the Texans offensive line is beat up too. So you could really dominate with your defense within your division. I think this would be a great pick for them, and that's why it's so common. So moving on, now we have the Raiders, and this is another one where it just comes down to 2 very simple playmakers on offense. It's Jeanty or it's Tatoria McMillan. A lot of people are going to say, oh, corner. They really need corner. They have no corners on the roster. And I'm like, I understand that. But the value of the pick, if they can't move out of this spot, like, in this mock draft, then you got to get the best value out of this pick and then trust your drafting skills in the second round to get a guy like Trey Amos, okay? I mean, you can make the argument for running back, but it's like, would you rather have Will Johnson and, Quinshawn Judkins, or would you rather have, say, T-Mac or Ashton Genty and Trey Amos, So that's how you play the value game. Now, back to wide receiver and running back, I think these are both big needs, and it just comes down to scheme and best player available. And the way that they've been building this offense, I think, the offensive line has been surprisingly decent. Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer sets you up for 2 tight end sets. Trey Tucker's a deep threat, and Jacoby Myers can play in the slot. So you definitely are set up with Pete Carroll coming in to establish a strong run game. They have a good defense already. And I think that's been a big problem for the Raiders is their lack of identity on offense hasn't been able to complement the strength of their defense. So I think taking Ashton Genty here and, trusting yourself to find a wide receiver and a corner later in the draft is definitely the best move, especially considering, like I said, I think he's the best player in the draft. So helping out a guy like Geno Smith and making sure he's got, one all-pro tight end, one of the best backup tight ends, and then potentially top 5 running back right away in Ashton Genty, then he's going to be able to dink and dunk and distribute the ball between those guys. And it's really going to open up things for Jacoby Myers, who's pretty good anyways, I think, and Trey Tucker, who I think definitely showed some potential as a deep threat, in that type of offense where you're running the ball, playing defense and throwing some play action shots. I think the Raiders could be really, really good. I think if they make this pick, I don't think it needs to get too complicated. I understand T-Mac is good, but I just think Ashton Genty is better. And that is going to be the pick here. Ashton Genty goes number 6 to the Raiders. And now here, once again, this is getting interesting. We have the New York Jets. And the big question is, once again, T-Mac, when is he going to get taken? Tyler Warren at tight end. A lot of noise about him going here. That's someone I've commonly mocked. And then Armand Membu. Definitely, 3 key players on offense that could help support Justin Fields. But I can't really decide, right, which one it's going to be because it's like they have Garrett Wilson, so they have like a glaring need at wide receiver, even if they don't have great depth. They did lose Morgan Moses on the offensive line, but they do still have Olu Fashanu and the guys on the interior like Vera Tucker. And then at tight end, it's like, yeah, Tyler Warren is definitely better than Tyler Conklin, but he is like there, right, and he's not bad. So instead of looking at like the biggest, we are going to look at the biggest need by looking at what they have not addressed. So looking at the wide receiver group, they have Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard, Josh Reynolds, who they did pick up, and then at tight end, it's just Tyler Conklin. Now, that's not great depth, right? That's not a great tight end group. So to me, you could look at this and say you could have one of each, like a running back, a tight end, and a wide receiver between Brees, Garrett Wilson, and then draft Tyler Warren. That could work really well. You can make a nice wide receiver duo for Justin Fields, but I think he is going to pepper Garrett Wilson with targets as it's a little difficult for him to come off of his first read compared to some other guys. So I'm not sure how great of a move that would be. But what I know would definitely help him and the entire team would be drafting Armand Membu, right? He's going to help out the run game, help out the designed run game for Justin Fields. And then obviously he's going to help in pass protection. They are the Jets, so they could just randomly take Shedeur Sanders here, like the Falcons surprised us all last year, but I really doubt it. And to me, them letting go of Morgan Moses really signaled to me, and I think it should have signaled to everyone else, that they were expecting an offensive tackle to be available here, and they wanted to set themselves up for the future, whether they do end up sticking with Fields or, they eventually move on to someone else. So the pick here is going to be Armand Membu at number 7 to the Jets. Up next, we got another spot that could get a little interesting. We have the Carolina Panthers at number 8. And for them, they have a lot of needs. Their defense was really bad last year. Their offense is very bare and young, and they could use a lot. So I think that would mean that T-Mac is in play here. They do have concerns at corner. And, the defensive line across the board with Derek Brown having that injury, even defensive tackle can't be ruled out. So guys like Walter Nolan, you're definitely looking at edge. So you could start seeing the edge guys come off the board here. So there's a lot that they could do here. But I'm going to say that they want to make up for trading Brian Burns last offseason. and get an edge rusher. And I heard a lot of noise about Jalen Walker. And to be honest, I don't understand the tie between these two. I understand there could be a tie because of like the team and things like that. But to me, it's just the spot that they're picking an edge rusher. Um, I don't really think at 8 is a great spot to take a guy who did not play the spot you're intending on playing him full time. And what I mean by that is Jalen Walker was not a full-time edge rusher. He was an off-ball linebacker that would, kind of line up in that edge rushing spot here and there, like an under linebacker or something like that. And sure, maybe, your scheme could be fit to be like that, but I don't think I would want to like sort of start building my defense with that, right? I think I'd want a guy that I can just plug in one spot and I don't have to figure out how I have to develop him. So he's got upside to be like that edge. But, with Clowney nearing retirement, I just think you got to get a new guy in here who's just going to stay and not be confusing. So I think you want a more experienced, well-rounded, proven edge. And I think at this spot, you're looking at the edge rushers and, you got, like I said, Jalen Walker, but you got Michael Williams out of Georgia, who's kind of like your really, really talented upside guy who's not quite developed. Same thing with Shamar Stewart. But you come down here to Mike Green, and he fits the scheme that they want to do as like the 3-4 outside linebacker. And also, he's one of the most productive guys in college. I think he actually might be the most productive edge rusher that we have in this year's class. And that tells me that you're going to get the most experienced, the most ready guy. And that's what they need. They need immediate help for this pass rush, for this defense. And I think that's why it makes sense here. I understand, like, if you want to go for upside with a Michael Williams, Shamar Stewart, or a Jalen Walker, but I just think you want to get a guy who is going to be able to start for you right away. You really got to get this defense fixed. So I think you start here and you take Mike Green. And now moving on, we have the New Orleans Saints, and they have so many needs. And I've been saying all offseason how if there was a team I would not want to be trying to rebuild or fix right now, it would be the Saints. They are screwed in the cap. And not to mention that, they thought they were okay at quarterback, but Derek Carr's got a shoulder injury based off that AC sprain he had last year. Seems like it never truly healed, and this is just getting bad for them now. I mean, Derek Carr's a fine guy to roll into a rebuild with, but if you can't even play him, nothing on this offense is going to develop. Spencer Rattler is going to get thrown out there and sacrificed this whole next season if they don't do anything at quarterback, because you're not going to get Aaron Rodgers, right? I don't think there's any free agent quarterbacks who are going to be able to elevate this team and help the offense develop. So I think they will see Shedeur here, and their heart's going to start pumping. Because, I think one of the great picks here would be T-Mac, considering Olave's injury history, getting an investment in a big, strong wide receiver who you can rely on staying healthy and making big plays for you. But to me, I think they're going to panic here. And I think they're going to end up taking Shedeur Sanders, saying, we don't know when we're going to be able to get into a position to draft a quarterback like this again. I mean, even in a season as disastrous as it was for them last year, they still finished above the Panthers, and obviously they're at pick 9. So even when they're trying to, have a bad season, even though you're never really trying to, you get what I mean. They just always seem to be like at least a 5-win team. So I think Shedeur Sanders here. I think, he could, if they develop a bit of a running game and an offensive line, unlike he had in college, I think he actually could develop here and be all right. But that's a big if, right? That was a big concern I had with teams like the Giants and the Browns when it came to taking him. It's still a concern that I have here, but I feel like I said, this is a predictive mock. This is not what I would do, and I think that they would just take Shedeur Sanders if he was here. So there you go. Shedeur Sanders comes off the board at 9. He doesn't fall crazy far. And not to mention, I think, even if they do pass on him, there's going to be teams that would want to trade up for him in the teens or, maybe right ahead of the Saints or something like that. But that's where I have him going in my predictive mock, is at number 9 to the Saints. And now we get to number 10. We start getting to some teams that have, some competitive excitement. We have the Chicago Bears. They got Ben Johnson this offseason. They overhauled the offensive line. And a lot of people are thinking, they're even going to go offensive line with this pick. But, well, Campbell's gone. Armand Membu's gone. The two top guys, at least in my eyes. So to me, I mean, the pick is becoming pretty clear to me, and I'll get to that in a second. But there's other needs like defense, things like edge, defensive tackle. Walter Nolan is still on the board. There's still plenty of edge guys who could, develop and improve this defense. But to me, the defense was not the problem last year. And what we saw from the Lions and the way that their regime operates, we've seen so far from this Bears team investing into the offensive line, except they've done it almost like all in free agency. So I think based off of that, that they're going to try to establish a run game with this first overall pick of this new regime and with Ben Johnson. And I think even though Ashton Gency's gone, I think they're going to see Omari and Hampton. They're going to watch his tape and they're going to say, he's not Ashton Gency, but this guy would be the first running back off the board in plenty of drafts. And I think they're right. Omari and Hampton, he's got the prototypical size, 6 foot, 220, super athletic, super fluid, good in the receiving game. And even though people might suspect, the Bears might try to go 1-2 punch with running back and keep Swift as like sort of the receiving back, I think Omari and Hampton can do everything for you on offense and be a 3-down back. Just because they ran 2 in Detroit doesn't mean that that's exactly what they're going to want to do here in Chicago, especially if the guy like Hampton is way better than Swift. So I think this could develop a bit of like a Joe Burrow to Joe Mixon-esque role where he plays all 3 downs and only really comes off the field when he's resting, unlike the relationship between Gibbs and Monty. And I think that's something that would really help out Caleb Williams. You just got to have someone who can bail him out every now and then. It was supposed to be like Roma Doomsday and DJ Moore, but with the offensive line being as bad as it was, that wasn't working. And when they tried to lean on the run game, Swift, really, really inefficient running back with bad vision, even though he does have some nasty jukes every now and then. So I think this is not only what they would do, but I think this is a great pick. People trash running back drafting way too much. Hampton and Gency are definitely, to me, in a tier above the rest of the guys, and I think they're worth the top picks. Reminds me a lot of the Bijan and Gibbs draft. It might seem kind of crazy, but I have the Bears going Omari and Hampton at 10. And now, up next, we have the San Francisco 49ers here at 11. Needs all over the place. We are just a year separated from this team, like a year and a half, right, of them being in the Super Bowl and losing to the Chiefs, coming into the next year with one of the best rosters in the league and all that. And then it all just completely fell apart. Ayuk tearing his ACL, and their rookie, Ricky Pearsall, missing, pretty much the whole first half of the season after being shot. And then they traded Deebo Samuel this offseason. Not to mention all the losses they have on the defensive side of the ball. It's pretty crazy. But no, in San Francisco, I think they're going to want to start rebuilding within the trenches and on the defensive side. Looking at it, they do have Nick Bosa, but I think they need defensive tackle and they need another edge. So which one is going to be more important to them? Looking at the edge guys and the defensive tackles available, there's good options on both sides. I mean, you have Walter Nolan, who should be rated higher than this, and at edge, you still got a guy like Jalen Walker, Michael Williams, Shamar Stewart, James Pierce Jr. All have different, qualities that make them good. Your developmental guys, your raw sort of guy, and then James Pierce Jr., who is already developed as that speed rusher. But to me, I think that they're going to go try to help increase this run defense, not just the pass rush. But you can get 2 for 1 in here if you go Walter Nolan. Walter Nolan is one of the most violent-looking defensive tackles we have in this year's draft. Mason Graham shares a lot of those qualities, but Walter Nolan has more athleticism to make the most of it. And even though he's not quite as developed as Graham already, he's still well worth one of these top 15 picks, in my opinion. And I think the 49ers are going to see it the same way. They haven't been able to get this interior defensive line figured out, throwing money at it with guys like Javon Hargrave and things like that just have not worked. And I think if they get to pick their guy and Walter Nolan is here, falling right into your lap, you can also take him away from the Cowboys, who would definitely like him. Great pick here for them, and I think it's what they'll do. Walter Nolan goes number 11 to the 49ers. And now we have at number 12, the Dallas Cowboys. And they have needs everywhere, but especially on defense. And it makes you curious about what positions this Cowboys team feels like they already have figured out on their team, because it seems like they always have some later round developed guys who end up becoming starters for them. But for me, I think it's going to be their offensive line. They had some guys come in, rotating in last year and playing not too bad. And the D-line, they've made some moves to address in this offseason. But I still think that they would look at that and corner and linebacker to see who's the best fit. So let's see who's available just on the board. A wide receiver also, because T-Mac is right here, and they need a complement to CeeDee Lamb. And I feel like he'd be a much better version of Michael Gallup, and I think they would really like him. Really hard to pass up on him here. At corner, you got Will Johnson. You also have Jahdae Barron. Barron's definitely more of that slot versatile guy, whereas Will Johnson's your definite outside corner. they could probably use both of them. I think Will Johnson would be a better fit. And then for the edge, it's the same guys we've been talking about. But I think James Pierce Jr. Would be kind of like too similar to Parsons, and the other guys are more developmental guys, so they might not be bad picks, but I still think they can find those positions later. But what I don't think they can find later is an X wide receiver as good as T-Mac, and I think they're really going to like him. This is seemingly like a Cowboys pick. You get the star type of player, inject some excitement back into this fan base as the offense is, sort of declined, I feel like, year over year for quite a while now, and I think not having a guy like Michael Gallup in there has been a big reason why in games where the defenses are able to, dial in on CeeDee Lamb or get pressure on Dak, it just seems like he's got no answer. And I think having a guy like T-Mac to bail him out would definitely be a good pick here. Just seems like this is something that's going to happen too, because there's a lot of talk about T-Mac falling. And even though I think the Cowboys would like to trade down and move down, every team wants to do that. Maybe a team wants to move up for T-Mac, but I just don't see it happening. And like I said, I'm not predicting trade. So I have T-Mac going here at 12 to the Dallas Cowboys. And up next, we have the Miami Dolphins at number 13. And they have big needs like everywhere. They have a ton of money invested in players who have gotten very major injuries like Tua, but not just that. Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb. It's just like, oh my God, another bad situation, kind of like the Saints, but definitely a little bit more hope, as they've been able to win games, at least when their team is out there. So looking at their needs, it's definitely offensive line, got to keep Tua healthy. The defensive interior, like defensive tackle, and then the secondary, because Jalen Ramsey, he could be gone, and, there's like no one else behind him. Safety is definitely something that a spot that they need help. So you're looking at Will Johnson and you're looking at Jahdae Barron, and they definitely could be good picks for the Dolphins here. But to me, it's like that defense doesn't matter at all if Tua keeps getting concussed, because you can't block for him. And this Mike McDaniel offense does quite a bit of misdirection that is supposed to, kind of help out their offensive line in a sense, and, make the defense hesitate, giving them more time to block. But it just hasn't been enough. They have not been able to protect Tua. And even if he is fragile, you got to sell out to protect him. And even if you end up eventually moving on from Tua, it's not like it's a waste, because the next quarterback is just going to benefit from the better offensive line. So even though I think Will Johnson and Jahdae Barron might be good picks here, I think you can find secondary guys later. Will Johnson is great, though. I think Jahdae Barron's a little more confusing. He's kind of like Jalen Walker, where it's like, what do you do with him? But we're going offensive line here. So who is the best offensive line available to them? Well, you got Josh Simmons, who, if it wasn't for his injury, would be noted as probably the best tackle in this whole class. Josh Connerly, but I think that would definitely be more of a reach. And also Kelvin Banks is a great scheme fit for this Dolphins offense. He's very, very athletic, so he'll be able to do those, moving outside zone blocks and stuff, but also hold up with his anchor and pass protection too, having the strength that you're going to be able to need to do that. So, and also, like I said, you really just got to go offensive line here. I'd be surprised if it was someone else besides Kelvin Banks, like maybe an interior guy like Gray Zabel or a Tyler Booker. But, if you want to kick Kelvin Banks into guard, you can do that too. You want to get a guy who has the potential to do both. So I think having Kelvin Banks on the team is definitely going to help out and keep Tua protected and keep this offense on the field. So at number 13, I have the Miami Dolphins going Kelvin Banks. And now moving on, the Indianapolis Colts are very, very happy, as they have needs all over the defense. They have needs on the interior offensive line, losing Will Fries and Ryan Kelly. But they've had a need for years and years at tight end. And there's been a lot of noise about Colston Loveland being taken as high as here at 14, because they thought Tyler Warren was probably going to be gone. I would probably take him before this if I was drafting for every team, but he's still going to be here in this case. So you don't even have to consider Colston Loveland. And although, you can consider a guy like Shamar Stewart or Michael Williams to be sort of a power complement to Laiatu Latu, I think going edge 2 years in a row is not what this team needs to do. Gray Zabel, yeah, he could be a good plug inside to help fill in one of those missing interior spots. And Jahad Campbell might be a good plug-and-play solution for the tackling problem. But I think, with the injury, that's going to wear you off. And then I think just the fact that they've needed tight end so bad and they got a blue-chip prospect sitting free here at 14, this is their dream draft scenario. You don't even have to move up to get him. You just stay right where you are and plug a hole that you've had for years. And this is going to help Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones be sort of that check down safety blanket, since they both are sort of wild and unpredictable. I think this would be a great pick for them, and I think this is very obvious if the board lands like this. 14, the Colts are going to take Tyler Warren. And now up next, we have the Atlanta Falcons. And this one is also going to be a bit of a simple one. I mean, they do need center, wide receiver too, but the defense needs help all over the front seven. And this is another spot that you could consider Jahad Campbell. Starting to talk about him, guy who's kind of falling a little bit, but that's something you can expect when there's injuries involved, this close to the draft. So to me, between edge and defensive tackle, since we're not going linebacker, the top guys here are definitely going to be Kenneth Grant, whereas he's probably, all the way down here. And then the edge guys, if we click to those, you got Jalen Walker still on the board, Mike L. Williams, you got Shamar Stewart, and then you got James Pierce Jr. So I just kind of have a feeling that, out of all these guys, James Pierce Jr. is probably giving you the most immediate impact. Even Donovan Ezeraku probably giving you more of an immediate impact than Jalen Walker, Mike L. Williams, or Shamar Stewart, more developmental guys. But to me, I'm just looking at Atlanta and Georgia, and the fact that Mike L. Williams definitely has potentially the highest ceiling as an edge rusher here. And I just think they're not going to be able to help themselves. This isn't a pick that has a whole bunch of reason outside of there's just this weird relationship that stands out, because obviously it's the same state. But that ends up happening in the draft sometimes. You're a little bit closer. They held their interview with Mike L. Williams last out of all the edge rushers, which makes me think that they were sort of checking out everyone else first to get an idea before they, met with Mike L. Williams to see, okay, is there anyone else that we like more than Mike L. Williams? No? All right, we're going to take him. So that's what I have him doing here at number 15. Bit of a randomish pick, but, this is a predictive mock draft and random things happen. So a lot of people are going to view this as too high for Mike L. Williams. But, I mean, considering the potential, a lot of teams do this where they take shots on edge rushers. And he's kind of got that Trayvon Walker build where he went number 1 overall. But you get a guy like this at 15, I mean, same school too and everything. I think that's pretty good value. So if you want to do that, instead of going with a guy like James Pierce Jr., who might be a little more limited in run defense anyway, then I think you go ahead and do that. But you really hope that you can get a pass rush impact from him as soon as possible. At 15, the Falcons go Mike L. Williams, and he stays home. Number 16, we got the Arizona Cardinals. And they have, definitely defensive needs. They also have needs on offense in terms of the offensive line and wide receiver. But they need help in the front seven. They need help at corner. They need help with everything. I'm really surprised how good they did last year. Despite, some of the injuries and Marvin Harrison Jr. not quite working out right away. But it's a glaring need at corner and linebacker. And you would think Jahad Campbell, but I also think Jalen Walker would be in consideration here, because he specifically does make a lot of sense for Jonathan Gannon, because Jonathan Gannon uses guys like Zaven Collins as sort of those off-ball linebackers who end up on the edge, and they run a lot of creative blitzes and stuff. But I think already having Zaven Collins would mean that you wouldn't want to add another guy like that. You'd want more different skill sets for you to make different plays for, open up your defensive playbook to run different types of blitzes, because if you only have the same type of guy, you're only going to be able to run those types of blitzes. So I think it would have made more sense for them to go with a different type of edge guy. But also their need at corner is just so big. Some of the top edge guys have already been taken, but the top corner, Will Johnson, is still on the board. And I really think it is that simple. I don't think you want to go with a guy like Jahdae Barron, where he's not necessarily going to just plug up one spot in the secondary right away, but Will Johnson will be that outside corner for you for the next couple years until you have to extend him. And, a lot of people are down on him right now because his film in his last year wasn't quite as good, but he was dealing with injuries. So if you go back and look at the way he looked before that, he was regarded as the number 1 corner before the season even started, and that's the reason why I think getting a guy like that here at 16 is really good value at a position of need. That's what they should do, I think, and that's what I think they will do if the board lands like this. So Cardinals go Will Johnson at 16, cornerback. And now at number 17, a team I love talking about, and that's the Cincinnati Bengals, because they need defense so bad. And if they have the audacity to take an offensive lineman or a wide receiver here, I will spontaneously combust on the live stream. But now that I've said that, I also think that they should take edge as insurance for Trey Hendrickson. But knowing them and how they just push off everything and just procrastinate, I'm going to assume that they're going to be stubborn and they will just assume that they're going to get the deal done and that they need to spend this resource somewhere else, because that just sounds like something that they would do. So if they won't go edge, even though it is the best player available, and they go and try to address some other position of need, you're looking at defensive tackle, maybe corner or safety. And that's going to open up guys like Kenneth Grant at defensive tackle. Start thinking about him. Jahdae Barron could play multiple different spots for them in the secondary as they kind of sort through Mike Hilton and the other guys who they're debating as their contracts expire, debating keeping. And you also have Malachi Starks, who is the best safety in the draft. You could go ahead and just take him here and make up for letting go of Jesse Bates. And then you got James Pierce Jr. and Donovan Ezraku as your immediate impact edge rushers, as you could pair them up with Trey Hendrickson. But once again, they're just not going to do that, because why would they do something like that? And then that's going to leave us down to Kenneth Grant, Jahdae Barron, and Malachi Starks. But to me, this is tough. I think with the expiring contracts at corner, they will at least address this and get ahead of their issues rather than get too far behind. Kenneth Grant would be a great fit. And I could see them going either way, but I think they're going to go ahead and take Jahdae Barron, specifically because of the unique situation they're in with their cornerback need, where it's like they have guys who can play there right now, but chances are they're not going to be able to bring them all back after next year. So I think having a guy like Jahdae Barron, who maybe could, slide into whichever spot you end up needing, I think does actually sort of make sense for them, where you don't necessarily need the starter right away. Once you know what you have with him, then you can decide where you want to put him, maybe which are the other guys you actually want to keep. So for the Cincinnati Bengals at number 17, they're going to select Jahdae Barron. Now moving on to number 18, we got the Seattle Seahawks, and oh boy, this is another one that could get me hot on draft night. They need wide receiver and they need edge, but they need nothing more than interior offensive line, which they have needed for so many years. That has always bothered me that they neglect this, because it's always an issue for them. And with a defensive head coach, it's tough because they could prioritize those defensive needs like edge. But I think Mike Mack also has the wits to know that, improving the offensive line is going to help what he wants to do with his defense. So come on now, it's got to be the best interior offensive lineman available. And to me, that's going to be Gray Zabel. He's also the most versatile inside offensive lineman outside of Will Campbell, as well as he could be a fit anywhere in the offensive line, like I just said. And to me, Tyler Booker, even though he might have a little bit more size than Gray Zabel, I think you take the versatility and the fact that Gray Zabel can kick outside the tackle, say if you have an injury or something, which the Seahawks have dealt with in the past. I think Gray Zabel's also just super underrated, and would really like to see him go here at 18 to the Seahawks, a team that could really use him. So Gray Zabel goes 18 to the Seahawks. And now we move on to number 19. And this is the Buccaneers. And the Buccaneers really don't have a single immediate need. And this is our first team where this is the case. Typically in this situation, you just go best player available, most upside, or you could also get ahead of future needs, right? You're never truly out of the need market. Even if your needs aren't there this year, you're going to have needs the following year. And if you can address them a year in advance, it is so beneficial, something the Eagles have done so well, and a big reason why their roster is so great. So like inside linebacker with Lavonte David, he's going to be a future need because he is destined to retire any year now. He's a legend, but he's really getting up there in age. Even if he's still good this year, he might not be back next year. So the best inside linebacker in the draft has fallen only because of his concern of injury. And with Lavonte David ahead of him, he won't be forced into that full-time role that could potentially re-aggravate his shoulder. And in this way, he can learn from one of the best linebackers of the 2000s who's seen it all to this point. He's seen the evolution of NFL offenses, and getting a guy with as much upside as Jahad Campbell into a situation like that, I really, really like. It's going to help you in your future. And hey, having him and Lavonte David on the field, at some point this year would be pretty awesome. So I think Jahad Campbell and that Todd Bowles defense would be a great fit and an awesome pick for the future. Buccaneers go Jahad Campbell at 19. And at number 20, we got the Denver Broncos, a team that I had been mocking Omarion Hampton all offseason, but the Chicago Bears, ruined the party for them. And now they have to consider other running backs. But as I mentioned, I believe that there is also not just a gap viewed by me, but in the NFL between Ashton Jeanty and Omarion Hampton. And then like the next guys, whether it's Quinshawn Judkins for you, Cam Scatteraboo, Caleb Johnson, Travion Henderson, whoever it is, there's a gap, right? So I think they're going to look in a different direction than running back. In this case, the other needs are going to still be playmaker, tight end, wide receiver. And there's some guys here. I mean, Luther Burden's fallen pretty far. So you could look at guys like him, Emeka Egbuka, Matthew Golden. And then at tight end, you do still have Colston Loveland there. And at running back, it's Travion Henderson, Quinshawn Judkins, Caleb Johnson, Cam Scatteraboo. But I think now that the top two running backs are gone, they're going to address that last. Sean Payton does run a committee. So if you're not going to get a true workhorse, you might as well just keep going with the committee approach, even if you're going to improve it a little bit. So that takes us down to tight end and wide receiver. So Colston Loveland's great. And I think in Sean Payton's offense would be pretty awesome. But wide receiver is looking really, really good too. I'm really, really high on Luther Burden. And I think he can be that sort of number one for them because they have Cortland Sutton, who's the X, Marvin Mims, another sort of X as a deep threat, and then Troy Franklin, who, can play a little bit in the slot, but is also, probably better on the outside considering how skinny he is. So you definitely could consider the wide receivers here. But to me, I think since you do have guys developing at wide receiver, you want to give them some time to do so and address the huge need you have at tight end. And Colston Loveland, although I think 14 to the Colts is too high, I think this is a really good spot for him. You already have other wide receivers, like I said, but you don't have a tight end like this. And none of your wide receivers besides Sutton are big, and he's stuck on the outside. You can use Colston Loveland as that big slot, with those quick, short route schemes that Sean Payton loves to do. Bo Nix, using him as a safety blanket. I think this would be a pretty awesome pick, really help them out converting in the red zone. You don't have to just address that through the running back. So I think Colston Loveland is a great pick here at 20 for the Broncos. Creeping up on 50 minutes, and we're only at pick 21. Getting quite a bit of breakdown here for you guys, but let's keep it going. The Broncos just picked Colston Loveland at 20. And now we're at 21 with the Steelers, who I mocked Shedeur Sanders last time in my mock draft with trades as he fell all the way down there. But I've since had him taken by the Saints. So still no quarterback on this roster. Could be a shocking pick here like Jalen Milroe or Jackson Dart. But I don't see them doing that in the first round. I see them either trading back and taking him at the bottom of the first round or trading back up into the bottom of the first round. So I'm looking at interior defensive line, tackle, wide receiver, and cornerback. The corners are gone now. So it's down the wide receiver, tackle, and interior defensive line. So you got Luther Burden, you got Kenneth Grant, and at tackle, you got Josh Simmons and Connerly. But I think with Flatanu coming back, no need to go tackle. So it's either wide receiver or it's an interior defensive line. And although I really liked Keanu Benton, he's still developing. And Cameron Hayward, he can't play forever. So I think you really want to go ahead and address this interior defensive line. As great as these wide receivers are, I just think Luther Burden, Emeka Egbuka, Matthew Golden, they're all really good. But once they become your third wide receiver, I think the impact you're getting from them isn't quite as much, except for Emeka Egbuka playing in the slot, just solely in the slot, could be very, very good. But if you don't have a quarterback throwing them the ball, or you get a guy like Milroe, who's primarily a running guy, I don't think you want to do that. I think you want to control the trenches, which is actually the direction I think they're going to aim for. So I think they're going to go interior defensive line to get this defense back to being to keep them, first of all, as the elite run-stopping unit that they are, but also keep the floor for the pass rush up, as, there's talks of them potentially trading a TJ Watt or something like that. You never know what might happen on draft night. Could be for a quarterback, but I'm going to have them going Kenneth Grant here. Probably the best run-stopping guy after Mason Graham. And he's also got some upside to be a pass rusher, but you're taking him here to stop the run. In the AFC North, too, that's going to be good. And just the AFC in general, very competitive conference. So I think this is going to be a solid pick for them here, and it's going to be tough to be mad at. So Kenneth Grant here goes at 21 to the Steelers. And moving on to the Chargers. And John Harbaugh is pissed. Kenneth Grant just got taken. But they still have needs on the interior offensive line, interior defensive line, and at wide receiver. And as much as I want to say Harbaugh will go with the trenches, I think, unlike the Steelers, they're going to look at this wide receiver group and they're going to say, we don't have a guy like that. The Steelers, they do have Pickens. They just traded for DK. So I think it makes sense for them to address another need there. But for the Chargers, after, the picks that they made last year, I think it makes a lot of sense after going Ladd in the second to go with a wide receiver here in the first. So looking at the guys who are available, and also just for offensive line, like Simmons, Connerly, they're not playing on the interior. You could see a Tyler Booker pick here. I did think about it, but I just think the need at wide receiver is too glaring. The offensive line isn't that bad. So you got to go wide receiver here. Who's the best fit? Well, Matthew Golden, he's your speedster. Definitely got some route running ability, but he's going to be your deep threat. Could definitely work out really well with Justin Herbert. Emeka Egbuka, best slot wide receiver on the board. Very, very good compared to guys like Amon-Ra. Would be a really nice addition for Justin Herbert, except he already has Ladd, who plays primarily in the slot. So I don't think he's the guy here. But Luther Burden is a player who's got that 6 foot, 200-pound frame, big and strong, but also really explosive, can fit that number one wide receiver role and play on the outside while Ladd stays on the inside. This offense still needs a ton of weapons, but why not knock out that alpha wide receiver right here with your first round pick and help out Justin Herbert? I think part of why you saw all those interceptions in the playoff game and not during the regular season is as you got playing more competitive defense. He's probably starting to panic as his wide receivers weren't able to create separation outside of Ladd McConkey. So that's why I think you see that happening. I think this would be a really, really good way to start addressing the biggest problem you faced last year. So Luther Burden goes here at 22 to the Chargers. And now you got three young wide receivers in Ladd, Quentin Johnston, and Luther Burden, all playing different roles. So even though Quentin Johnston hasn't been that great, hey, if all he's got to do is try to catch jump balls or, be a big X, then maybe he can develop into that as the attention is drawn away from him. So I think this is a great pick here. Chargers go Luther Burden at 22. Quite a steal. I'm very high on him. So I think that would be a really good fit there. Great fantasy guy that you'd want to pick up, especially for Dynasty. All right. Now on to number 23. We got the Green Bay Packers, who have addressed pretty much all of their immediate needs except for edge and free safety. They don't really have someone next to Xavier McKinney. They don't really have someone next to Rashawn Gary. So fortunately for me, the Packers have very strong draft tendencies. So let's see if we can use that to see exactly who they might pick. Brian Gutekunst has a strong tendency to take players who are from the SEC, who are very traitsy, and looking at the board and looking at their needs for free safety and for edge, at edge, oh, look at that. Jalen Walker is right there. But also at free safety, the best guy on the board is still there. And Malachi Starks, both SEC guys. Malachi Starks, super productive, best safety in the draft for a reason. Jalen Walker, obviously a really, really traitsy guy. Pass rusher, but also off-ball linebacker. So what are they going to do here? Well, I think with Malachi Starks, the thing is, I think they believe that if they want to add a safety, they can do it later. They're big on draft value when it comes to position, not just being from the SEC or being traitsy. So although Malachi Starks would make a lot of sense here and you take him away from a team that would really want him in the Vikings, who's in your own division, I think getting a guy like Jalen Walker here and pairing him up on this defensive line with all of your very different skill sets and guys like Rashawn Gary, who's kind of like a 4-eye if I had to give him a true position, but he plays on the edge. He's a big power rusher. Lucas Van Ness, who's kind of like a 3-tech, but can also slide out to that 4-eye spot. And then you don't really have a guy who's more of like a pure outside rusher, and Jalen Walker can be that for you. You can just stick him on the other side as outside rusher, and you can have Gary as a 5. You can have Lucas Van Ness as a 4-eye, and then Jalen Walker right next to him. I think that would be a really, really good way to line up this defensive line, adding a ton of talent and physicality that you're going to need if you want to be able to beat this Philadelphia Eagles team. You got to be able to stop the run and get after the passer. So I think maybe adding like another big edge sounds like it makes sense here, but they already have so many guys like that I think they need someone with a different but still disruptive skill set. And I just think this is like kind of all tying together for Jalen Walker here. I thought, him being all the way up there at the top was a little bit too high. And although, he might not be quite the immediate impact as the other edge rushers, I think if you just stick him right there and you keep him there because he's the perfect fit in your scheme for that spot, then I think that would be a great fit for him to develop because he's just playing pass rusher the whole year. You're not messing around with him playing off-ball linebacker. You got Quay Walker, so that's not going to happen. So Jalen Walker at number 23 to the Green Bay Packers should be a very impactful pick for their defense. Now up next, we have the Minnesota Vikings, and they also have no immediate needs, but they got to look towards the future. So looking at their secondary, Stephon Gilmore's unsigned. They lost Cam Bynum in free agency, so safety and corner could be a need. Harrison Smith is still playing somehow. That dude's a legend. But considering they do use multiple safeties all the time, like I said, Smith's going to retire soon. I think Starks is just the obvious pick here. And this is something that we've been able to project for pretty much the whole offseason. Same thing with running back. Safety is a very devalued position in the draft. So when it comes to the guys who aren't like blue chip first, top 10, top 5 picks, they're going to fall definitely past 20. So, I had Hampton going at 20 to the Broncos all the time. And I've had Starks going here pretty much the whole offseason for the Vikings. I think I had them maybe picking Derek Harmon like one time, but Malachi Starks is the pick here, your future safety, and he can also start right away for you in the multiple safety set. So Malachi Starks is the pick here at 24 for the Vikings. And now here, the Houston Texans. To me, they have other needs. They need depth at wide receiver. They need some help on defense, but it's just offensive line. I mean, like I said, they need depth at other spots, but I have no idea personally why they traded away Laramie Tunsil as if they're like starting a rebuild. You're like starting over in the offensive line, and this kind of forces your hand with this pick. Josh Simmons would have been the best guy, and maybe if you wanted him to like follow up Laramie Tunsil, that would have made sense. But now you can't really take him because he's probably not going to be able to be 100% right away. So looking at the other offensive tackles, there's one left who's not named Josh Simmons who could go in the first round, and that's Josh Connerly. And they're just going to kind of be forced to take him here. I mean, if they like Ursere, then they can go ahead and take him. But I think it's just going to be Josh Connerly. This is the way the board falls, and I think this is what they would do. Could they go interior offensive line? Sure, but I think you'd want to go ahead and take your tackle before you take your offensive guard. Tyler Booker could be great, but he cannot kick outside. Josh Connerly, if it doesn't work out, I'm sure he could kick inside. So Josh Connerly goes at number 25 to the Texans. And now up next, we got the Los Angeles Rams, a team that I have been very high on for quite a while. I think they're very close to winning another Super Bowl. They really smashed the draft last year. Looking forward to seeing them do it again in this year's draft. They need depth at a lot of positions: edge, corner, tight end, wide receiver. But to me, if they want to win the Super Bowl, they're going to have to be able to stop the Eagles and Saquon Barkley and the run game. So Braden Fisk was a great pick last year. He's a great rookie, but he's a pass rusher as a defensive tackle. They need a run stopper, especially after losing a guy like Poona Ford, who was just like a pure run stopper. So I see them going top interior run defender and going for those more depth picks later in the draft, as they can pick guys who have, the specific skill sets that they're looking for. But with this, what you need, and everyone else needs this too. Everyone else needs run defense right now. So even if he isn't a huge upgrade as a pass rusher, I think they've got that covered with the picks they made last year in Jared Verse and Braden Fisk. So looking at the interior run defenders, we got Derek Harmon, we got Tyleik Williams, and we got Darius Alexander, all very different in the sense of like age and like, how many years they've played in the how many years they've played in college. Darius Alexander is very old. Tyleik Williams is a little bit leaner. I think Derek Harmon is definitely the pick here. He's the biggest guy, and he's got potential to be a pass rusher, but you don't need him for that. If he's the best run defender, that's who's going to go here. And he's the best one available. They could wait and try to take a guy later in the draft like Alex Collins, but when it's as big of a need as it is, I think, 26 is pretty good value in the first round, especially if he's, becoming a starter for you and he's going to be there for like 4+ years. So I think this is a good pick for them, really round out the biggest hole in that defensive line and in that defense in general, and address some of those other needs later in the draft. So Derek Harmon goes here at number 26 to the Rams. Now up next, we're starting to get to other Super Bowl teams. We got the Baltimore Ravens, who historically built through the trenches, but their biggest need is going to be at guard, losing Patrick McCarry in the offseason. I feel like they could also benefit greatly from a wide receiver. Really don't want to see them in the playoffs again when Zay goes down and Lamar's got to be Superman, but I think they're more confident that they can find a wide receiver in the second and third round than guard, especially when Tyler Booker is still on the board, the best pure guard in the draft, who's also a great fit, 6'5", 325. So he's going to be that mauling, run blocker. He went to Bama too, so he played in the SEC. He can definitely handle the physicality in the NFL. And he should be like a direct plug replacement for Patrick McCarry, can come in and start right away and keep this run game elite and keep the protection for Lamar so he can throw 41 more touchdowns. And let's hope he can actually do something in the playoffs. So Tyler Booker goes here at number 27 to the Ravens. And I think he's a great fit. At number 28, we got the Detroit Lions. And the Lions are kind of tough because you would assume defense, but that could have been mainly because of injury last year. I mean, if they lose They lost Josh Reynolds, which means they really don't have depth behind Amon-Ra and J-Mo, who have very specific roles too. And they also have a need at guard. So let's see what's available to them. So a wide receiver, you got deep threat Matthew Golden. Well, you already have J-Mo. You got Mecca Igbuka, who's basically Amon-Ra St. Brown, so you don't need him. So I'm not looking at wide receiver here. Looking at guard, well, Tyler Booker just got taken, so I don't know about Donovan Jackson going here. Maybe if he's got the mindset for them, they would take him, but I just don't think they're going to go guard or wide receiver, especially if the board falls like this, because I think someone they're really going to like who's going to be able to fit into that culture is sitting right here, and that's Donovan Ezraku out of Boston College. He's an edge rusher who's shown with his really, really high IQ and motor that I think he would, like I said, fit well with this culture. And you pair him up with Aiden Hutchinson to pressure the elite quarterbacks you need to beat on your way and in the Super Bowl in order to win. I think this is a great pick. This is something they really would have liked to have had last year after Hutch went down. Hopefully, kind of hold it down and be a low end number one at least. So you got that, at least that. So you at least have that going for you, right? So I think Donovan Ezraku is a great fit here, and I think it's someone they're going to want to take. So like I said, predictive mock draft, I think this is what they would do. Up next, we have the Washington Commanders, who are seemingly in all-in mode. The priority here would be to acquire a starter, ready player who is at a position of need, rather than a guy who's more developmental and you're shooting for upside. So with the primary need at edge, they have other needs at wide receiver, corner, and tackle. Emeka Egbuka sounds like it would be nice here, but you do already have Debo, who I think they're going to want to use in the slot. So I don't know about that. And the top corners are gone. You could definitely go with Trey Amos, but at tackle, all the top guys are gone too, except for Josh Simmons, who's coming off injury. He's not going to be able to play right away. So I think the best player available after that would be James Pierce Jr. He's an immediate replacement for Dante Fowler, who was your leading sack getter last year. True speed rusher who can apply pressure when needed. Like I said, he's already developed, so you're going to get that from him right away, and that's something that they're going to need, especially in the playoffs when you're versing teams like the Eagles who are going to depend on their protection of Jalen Hurts. And if you can make him uncomfortable, that'll actually give you a chance to win, because as great as this offense could be, if you can't stop them and they can control the clock, then you're not going to be able to beat them. So I think James Pierce Jr. is a great pick here, super athletic, already developed and ready to go. I think this is something that makes sense for them. It's something that they're going to want to do if he's there. Up next, we got the Buffalo Bills at 30, and they still need help on defense, corner, and D-line, but I think they could also use a wide receiver to pair with Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir. With no top corners on the board, they could default to Trey Amos, but at wide receiver, they could take a Buka, but Shakir's there at the slot. Golden, he may only work as a deep threat, and the X is still Keon Coleman, so he would have to be the number one. But at edge, I'm seeing some guys who could be a great value. And for me, it's the A&M boys who are sticking out to me. You got Nick Scorton and you got Shamar Stewart. And it's really going to come down to fit here. With the addition of Bosa, you might think, no, why would they go edge? But Bosa's primarily a pass rusher at this point, I would say. And he's also getting older. So having him rotating in on third downs would be, I think, a really good thing, which means you'd want to take a more run defending edge here. And I think the upside of another towering defensive end like Gregory Rousseau would be really good here. So why not get a guy like Shamar Stewart, who's got elite upside, right? He might have to develop a little bit, but that's okay because you do have Joey Bosa. And worst case scenario, he's a guy who's a solid run defender and Bosa comes in on third down. But best case scenario, you have an elite pass rush, maybe not a top 5 group, but definitely one that you're going to be happy rolling out there and going to make opposing quarterbacks uncomfortable with in the playoffs. So I think with that addition, the defensive line would be consistently great, not dominant, but great. So Shamar Stewart goes here at 30 to the Buffalo Bills, definitely falling a little further than some would have expected. So at number 30, and I'll say this about these teams near the bottom, much like the Bills and maybe the Lions, I could see them trading down out of this spot and a team like the Giants or the Browns trading up to this spot if they're interested in getting a guy like Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe on a 5th-year option. You would have to get them in the first round, so you'd have to trade up with one of these teams near the bottom in order to do so. And if it's the Giants, it's definitely going to be here with the Chiefs because I don't think they're going to want to trade with the Eagles. So now that we got that out of the way, they cannot trade. So What are they going to do here? To me, it's just wide receivers. Just, I mean, they got other needs, like for sure, but like if they don't go wide receiver here, to me that'd be crazy. I mean, Worthy's got this legal situation, Rice major injury, and probably going to get suspended. So you're not going to have him probably all next year, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. So I think you have to go wide receiver here. Last year, I thought they would draft Lad McConkey. They ended up going with Xavier Worthy. So they prioritized their deep threat over the slot. They brought back Hollywood Brown. They're going to hope Worthy's playing. So I don't think they're going to take another deep threat. I think now this is the time where they do take their slot receiver, because if Rashee Rice is more likely not to be there, that's what you're going to want. And luckily for them, the best slot wide receiver in the whole draft has fallen all the way down here to 31 in Emeka Egbuka. So I think this would be a monster pick. Huge for Dynasty, huge for fantasy, but also for the Chiefs, huge to have a guy that's going to be able to move the chains consistently, stay out there on the field for you and not drive 150 miles an hour down the highway with paraphernalia. So I think having him, and he could also be sort of like that safety blanket once Kelsey retires too. Really, really great pick, and very fortunate for the Chiefs, hitting a little bit of luck after getting blown out in the Super Bowl. So how's that for you? The Chiefs still lucky. Now at number 32, we got another team that's going to be a little lucky in this situation, and that's the Philadelphia Eagles. They just won the Super Bowl. They're on top of the world. They're very happy with the way things are going right now. But what are they going to do here? What are their biggest needs? Well, they lost some guys in free agency, Josh Sweat, Mekhi Becton, some guys in the trenches. So I think most people assume that they're going to go there, and I would say you're probably right. But also, not to mention, one of the best players in the draft has fallen here. Despite his injury, Josh Simmons would be the best tackle in this draft, but everyone passed on him because if you're drafting a tackle, you probably want them to play right away. Not the Eagles. They have Mailata and Lane Johnson, but Lane Johnson is very much nearing retirement, so he's not going to play forever. And why not get the, doubted prospect coming off of his injury to come in and learn behind Lane Johnson when he does not need to play. He does not need to start right away and risk re-aggravating his injury. He can sit and learn, kind of like Jahad Campbell behind Levante David. These teams that are already constructed, they can do things like this and set themselves up for the future and sustain their roster talent. And this is something the Eagles have done. This is a predictive mock. I think if Josh Simmons is here at 32, there's no way they don't take him. In fact, they might even move up a couple picks if he's falling that far, like after the Texans, if they don't take him or something. Maybe try to get ahead of the Commanders, a team that might be interested in him. So I think that's something that you could also consider. But in this case, I have him falling all the way down here to 32. And that would be a pretty awesome pick for them. Not very happy about it as a Giants fan because I think there's a real chance it could happen. But, we'll see. I am picking for them. So I tried to predict it, and I tried to give them a good pick. And I think this is what they would do. And I think, why would you do anything else? I mean, this is such an Eagles pick right here. All right, so unfortunately in that mock draft simulator, I cannot produce like the first round graphic for you guys. So I'm going to just read it off for you guys. Going from the top down, at number 1 overall, we have the Titans going Cam Ward. At 2nd overall, the Browns take Travis Hunter. At 3rd overall, the Giants take Abdul Carter. At 4th, the Patriots take Will Campbell. At 5th, the Jaguars take Mason Graham. And at 6th, the Raiders take Ashton Genty. At 7, the Jets go Armand Membu. At 8, the Panthers go Mike Green. At 9, the Saints are the team to take Shedeur Sanders. And at 10, the Bears, they go ahead and get their running back in Omarion Hampton. The Niners, they help build their defensive line and take Walter Nolan. The Cowboys, they get their star player in Tatoria McMillan to pair him up with CeeDee Lamb. The Dolphins help improve their offensive line by taking Kelvin Banks Jr. to protect Tua. The Colts take Tyler Warren to solve their long-standing tight end issue. The Falcons solve their long-standing edge issue and draft Michael Williams and keep him at home. The Cardinals go ahead and take Will Johnson to address their cornerback need. The Bengals do the same thing with Jahdae Barron, kind of a future addressed pick. The Seahawks, they go ahead and take Gray Zabel to help improve the interior offensive line, something they've needed to do for years. The Bucs, they go ahead and take Jahad Campbell, who's going to be their future linebacker after Levante David. The Broncos take Colston Loveland. Even though they wanted running back, they'll settle for a really, really good tight end that they can use in the red zone. The Steelers, they help improve their run defense, and they go ahead and take Kenneth Grant. The Chargers, they get a number one wide receiver to pair with Ladd McConkey to help out Justin Herbert in Luther Burden. The Packers at 23 get the developmental polarizing linebacker Jalen Walker and are going to stick him on the other side of the edge with Rashawn Gary. The Vikings take Malachi Starks to be the future safety after Harrison Smith and also start a little bit this year. The Texans, they go ahead and start rebuilding their offensive line and draft Josh Connerly. The Rams at 26 go Derek Harmon. The Ravens go Tyler Booker at 27 to fill the need of losing Patrick McCarry. The Lions at 28 go Donovan Ezeraku. At 29, the Commanders go James Pierce Jr. to help out the edge rush and, rebuild that. The Bills at number 30 go Shamar Stewart, pairing him up with Gregory Rousseau and rotating him with Joey Bosa. The Chiefs at 31, they snag Emeka Egbuka to almost be their number one wide receiver. That's pretty crazy. And then at number 32, the Eagles get Josh Simmons, the best tackle in the draft, only falling this far due to his injury. So I hope you guys enjoyed my predictive mock draft. I'm very interested to see how this draft is going to play out, how my picks go, how many of them I get right, how many of just the position that I get right, and all sorts of things like that. I'm so excited that the draft is finally here. It's like a holiday. At least it is for me. If it's not for you, well, maybe you'll get that excited if you keep watching The Pocket. So if you guys are excited for the draft, don't forget to check me out on my live stream. You can hang out and watch it with me. I'm going to, maybe I'll give it like some instant grades or whatever. They're not going to be, super backed up by anything, just how I feel about the picks. And in the live moment, I will be grading the first round after it happens as well. But just to hang out with me in the live stream, it's going to be a good time. I'm excited to do it. And, like I said, after the draft, we're gonna have lots of things coming. We're gonna have more of those Jaden Daniels video is gonna come out. The Jalen Hurts response video to all the comments. That comment section's on fire right now. I love to see it. And then it's power rankings time. You got dynasty rankings for these rookies. That's gonna come out first, and then you're gonna have your fantasy ADPs and things like that. Maybe even just do some best players in the NFL, like best wide receivers, best running backs, best quarterbacks, and things like that. And then the power rankings will kind of close out the summer. So the year is almost over. The first full year of YouTube is almost wrapping up. Once we're through the draft, it's just that last stretch. And then once I release my, final power rankings and NFL predictions, list and that whole giant video, that will be the first full year on YouTube for Scooter and The Pocket. All right, so thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to check out that Jalen Hurts overrated or overhated video. It is definitely my best video, and I'm very proud of it. I hope you all enjoyed this one, and I hope you enjoy that one. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.